Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Joyce and Mikhail Wallisch have weighed in ahead of their fight on BT, and the weigh-in did throw up a bit of a surprise. Joyce, 270 pounds on the scale. So that is a career heaviest, 5 pounds heavier than his heaviest, which was 265 pounds. That was for the Berman-Stavern fight. So this was a little bit of a surprise, but I think there is a couple of things behind this, and we'll get to that. But Mikhail Wallisch, he was 261 pounds. He looked in okay shape, but Joyce, 270. So I think part of what this is about is he didn't have a full training camp for this fight. The fight was only announced a couple of weeks ago, and he had a couple more weeks ahead of that where he was aware that it was going to be happening. So it wasn't the usual sort of 2.5 to 3 month span that he might have for a fight. But we have to consider the opponent here, that this is also a case that Mikhail Wallisch, it pretty much doesn't really matter what he's going to be doing in there. Joyce is going to win. He's going to knock him out and probably stop him in good fashion. But I would expect for a fight with Daniel Dubois in October, which is currently sort of scheduled for, that Joyce having a 3 month camp or so, he will be much trimmer. And if you look at him here on screen, he doesn't look out of shape, but maybe it's not the sort of usual shape that Joyce is in. He doesn't look as defined and ripped as he has in the past, but still not in bad shape. But I think he will be looking to have a longer camp and sort of peeking into that Dubois fight. This has come up at a certain point, and he probably was pretty confident about what he's going to do to Mikhail Wallisch. But Daniel Dubois coming in at that sort of weight, that would be perfect for Dubois. But I would expect for that Dubois fight, Joyce will be under 260 pounds, somewhere closer to the 256 he was for the Bryant Jennings fight, which was a good weight for him. He managed to go the rounds pretty comfortably and able to end up getting a decision in that fight. And as we know, Joyce does have a good engine, but if you're carrying that extra rubble around the middle or wherever else, it certainly sometimes doesn't do you any favors. But I don't really have any real concerns at this number, apart from it is a little bit sort of eye-catching when you first see it. But in the context of this fight, but also the fight to come, I think he will be at a lower weight. What do you make of it? And what did you make of Mikhail Wallisch, 261 pounds, and also this weigh-in? It's always a bit different with these social distancing type weigh-ins, sort of facing off from a distance, but they did sort of sneak in a fist bump as well. And just before we move on, Mikhail Wallisch, he's vowing to ruin Dubois versus Joyce, and then he wants to fight Tyson Fury. So I like the ambition in the statement. I don't know how much conviction is really behind that. Even win or lose, Tyson Fury is not going to be a fight that Mikhail Wallisch gets anytime soon. Even if he won, and even if he won a couple more fights. Yeah, I mean, I hope they do have some drug testing in place for this fight, because it sounds like he might be on something with those sorts of comments. But, you know, boxers, they're delusional at the best of times. We do know this. Meanwhile, Daniel Dubois, who's the schedule opponent for Joyce in October, the rising prospect, of course, currently 14-0, has been sparring at the Peacock Gym with another Frank Warren heavyweight, David Adelaide. And I just pronounced that David Adelaide, the last name Adelaide, because I had someone chasing me down all over social media demanding that I had to emphasize the E at the end. So David Adelaide. So this is obviously one of those sort of situations, much like the Joyce and Martin Bacoli sparring session that got some headlines a couple of weeks ago. This would have been a very good session to sort of be a fly on the wall and to see who was sort of getting a bit of dominance. David Adelaide is obviously a heavyweight who's just a couple of fights under the belt, but got a sort of rising amount of hype behind him. And I'm sure people would want to know where he sort of sits in his development, and that would be a good indication through some of these sparring sessions. But obviously, footage will not be released, unfortunately. Unified champion Anthony Joshua has again taken another pot shot at Tyson Fury, the WBC champion. As we know, these two have agreed that they want to fight in 2021, all going well should they beat their upcoming respective opponents. And Joshua and Fury, they did have apparently a chance meeting. This was in Marbella just a couple of days ago. But speaking to Sky UK, and not the first comment to come from Sky UK, Joshua says, "What have you seen from Fury? that makes him such a big threat? A couple of feints, moving around. If the sport is lacking so much talent, it just shows that all you need is feints and movement to be classed as one of the greats of this generation. So I think we need to sort of keep these comments in perspective. I look at this as Josh was, trying to stir the pot for the obvious fight that's going to come eventually. Well, we hope so, between him and Fury, and he's trying to sort of, draw the line with his fan base and the Fury fan base and boxing fans in general. Because Tyson Fury, his big wins, obviously he's got a similar win to Anthony Joshua and Vladimir Klitschko, but he beat him first, and obviously Deontay Wilder, who Joshua hasn't fought. But Tyson Fury, with his feints and movement, he is one of the best in the game at deploying, those skills in the ring. And boxing isn't just about knockouts and using your skills and attributes to flummox an opponent, outpoint them, and even stop them in the case of Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder too. Those feints and movements can play a big part in a victory, whether that is a points decision or a knockout. Remembering Tyson Fury in that rematch was mixing it up close for the most part with Deontay Wilder, who had few answers for those feints and movement. But Joshua's comments, I think for most people, it should be taken with a pinch of salt, just because it is sort of building towards that fight. And they are going to eventually ratchet up the sort of rhetoric and expect Tyson Fury at some point, as he has in the past, to sort of respond in kind. Meanwhile, CNBC is reporting that social media video app Triller has paid more than $50 million for exclusive streaming rights to broadcast the Mike Tyson vs. Roy Jones Jr. exhibition pay-per-view bout, which is happening in September. And that figure, if accurate, is incredibly eye-watering. And just at first glance, I wouldn't have thought there was the money to be recouped, from that event to sort of add up to over $50 million. But I'm happy to be proven wrong. But myself, I won't be buying that and watching it live. I just don't think there's the value in that. I'm more than happy to watch it on a replay at a later date, the next day or the week after. I mean, I'll read the headlines, on Boxing Scene or wherever else, but paying pay-per-view for this 8-round exhibition, I can't say that I'm willing to sort of pull the trigger on that, but I'm interested. Are you looking to buy that fight? Are you so hyped that you're willing to pay $40, $50, $60, $70, whatever the cost may be? I'd be skeptical that Triller will be able to recoup that money that they've paid, but perhaps this is a bit of a lost leader that they're trying to get more into the streaming market, into sports, and this is a vehicle for them to do so. Could be something like that. Heavyweight Travis Kaufman has paid tribute to his trainer Nazeem Richardson, who has died. He says on social media, "This one hurts big time. Just got word this morning that my head trainer Nazeem Richardson passed away. I was the last fighter he picked up and decided to work with. Something Bro Nas always taught me was to believe in myself. Why? I swore on everything after this fight I was going to visit him in the hospital because I never had the chance in the last couple of months he was in there. This one hurts deep, and I want to send my condolences to the family and our Concrete Jungle family." Travis Kaufman, he will be taking on Otto Wallin on August the 15th. And rounding out this heavyweight news mashup video, a story I actually meant to get to yesterday. I even had the translation ready, but it was in the wrong place and I forgot to sort of go through it. But we are talking Mikhail Huck. So he will be fighting Dennis Lewandowski, and this will be in August according to boxing1.com. So the news out of Germany is that Lewandowski and him will be facing off, and the translation of the article from boxing1.com says that this fight should serve as a warm-up for Huck. There is no other explanation for this approach, which can easily be described as a mismatch, which I think is completely right. Dennis Lewandowski, you might remember, he was part of that fight where, in the corner his stool collapsed between rounds. It was quite comical. I'm going to have to find that and save that because it was a good moment in the heavyweight division a year or two ago. But Huck versus Lewandowski, it is just a tune-up for Marco Huck. We'll have to see where Huck goes. He was meant to face Joyce at the start of this year. He broke his hand reportedly and has been out of the ring since. But what do you make of this? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.